We were able to estimate that for a typical facial scrub bottle, there could be 3 million microplastic pieces.
Speaking of sustainability, a podcast where we talk to frontrunners, innovators, and business specialists on, well, sustainability and where they think their industries are headed, and more importantly, how they can make them more sustainable. Hi, I'm Hani Larma from EcoChain, and in today's conversation, I'm speaking with Imogen Napper, an expedition scientist from National Geographic. We speak about her research into plastic pollution and how we can tackle this issue from both an individual and an industry level. Stay tuned. Hi, Imogen. Thank you so much for joining me today in this conversation. It's really a pleasure to speak with you and get to know a little bit more about your research.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to chat to you.
Firstly, could you maybe give a small introduction about yourself and about your expedition work and work at National Geographic?
Yes, certainly. So I grew up in a small seaside town in the southwest of the UK called Clevedon.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really lucky to be next to the ocean and feel connected to it. But when I was growing up, I never remember there being any plastic pollution
Mm.
on the beaches where I lived. But turn forward 20 or so years, and now when I go back to my family house and I visit my parents, I go back to the same beaches, and now there's beach clean groups, and you can see visible litter. And it's really crazy to think that this has happened, what I feel in my lifetime, that I can literally see the impact of plastic pollution.
Right.
So I wonder what's it going to be like in another 20 or so years. I've always enjoyed science and research, and I felt a bit lost at school that everyone knew what they wanted to do. And I had no idea what I wanted to do apart from that I loved research.
Yeah.
And I had a really rewarding master's supervisor that literally sat me down, made me draw a mind map of everything that I was passionate about and I found interesting. And all sides pointed to protecting the oceans and trying to take plastic pollution out of our oceans, or even better, stop it getting in there in the first place.
Yeah.
And that really opened the doors for me becoming a plastic pollution scientist.
Wow.
So from then, I did a PhD at the University of Plymouth.
Mm-hmm.
I specialised in the sources of plastic going into the marine environment, but from ways we wouldn't typically consider.
Right.
So we did research on microbeads in cosmetics, washing our clothes, because a lot of our clothes are made out of plastic,
Mm-hmm.
looking at biodegradable plastics and how they break down.
Yeah.
And then after that, having a PhD under my belt, I then did a few postdocs and started specializing in other areas such as car tires. So when we're driving around and bits of tire coming off our car. But I was also really fortunate to join National Geographic
Yeah.
and their expedition team to the Ganges River. We
Mhm.
went all the way from the Bay of Bengal up to near the Himalayas,
Yeah.
right near the top. And we did a whole research piece looking at how much plastic was going into a major river system and then potentially out to sea.
Wow. That sounds really interesting. How were you actually researching that? How do you start with researching such a topic?
So a lot of the development of this expedition was figuring out how the heck are we going to actually sample it.
Mm-hmm.
The expedition is a big bulk itself, but then there's so much behind the scenes of just trying to get the right equipment, having a look at the literature and seeing what's been done before,
Yeah.
making sure you're going to have all of the lab access and the lab equipment that you'll need when you come back, that you can analyze the plastic that you've collected. So there's uh, a lot of planning in that stage.
Yeah.
And we decided the Ganges River. We know it's unfortunately a very polluted river in some parts,
Mm-hmm.
but so is every river, you could say. The Ganges River gave us this perfect baseline that we could go to and have a look at a major river system
Yeah.
going from the source all the way out to sea. But it's no different than, let's say, the Thames or the Mississippi.
Right.
And we were able to connect with local researchers on the ground to make it collaborative. So in my work, what I did, I was part of the water team. So there are three different teams. We had a land-based team that were looking at litter on land and the different proportions, the
Mm-hmm.
different types coming from, how potentially it could get into the natural environment like a river.
Yeah.
Then you have a socioeconomic team, and they were looking at people's perceptions of plastic, and what they thought the solutions were to trying to mitigate it getting into the environment,
Right.
because these are the communities that live around the Ganges, so know it like bread and butter. And then you had the water team, which is the team that I was in, and we were on the water every day in a variety of different boats.
Mm-hmm.
We were taking samples in kind of like a 3D layer. So
Yeah.
we're taking samples from the river surface itself. We're taking samples at the bottom, so sediment, and then also in the air around the Ganges. So anything could deposit into the river.
Right. And is this investigation into plastics or specifically microplastics? How does that kind of differ in terms of research?
Yeah, it's a good question, because how you tackle it and how you research it is completely different. Because
Hmm.
microplastics, because they're so small, you need a microscope, and then what we call bigger plastics, so macroplastics. So imagine anything that's bigger than a fingernail, so
Yeah.
bigger than 5 millimeters in length. You can see it, so it's easier to count.
Yeah.
In the water study, although we did record any macro bigger bits of plastic that we
Hmm.
saw, we focused on microplastic,
Right.
because we know that microplastic is heavily abundant in the ocean, and eventually all bigger bits of plastic are going to break down into microplastic. So
Mm.
even if we stopped all plastic getting into our rivers and ocean today, the amount of microplastic is continually going to grow from the breakdown of bigger items.
Right. Okay. So even the bigger items will eventually become microplastics. That's interesting. Yeah, and also it's funny that you mentioned that it's not only in that river; it can be in the Thames or something. I recently had a friend who told me that there is a part of the Thames where, when the water actually goes a little bit more of a lower tide, you can actually walk in the riverbed and you can see all the kind of, yeah, artifacts and also plastics and other things that have just kind of collected into those rivers. So I thought that was a really interesting kind of visualization, that even, in a place like London, that you can actually visually go and see in the Thames all the things that have just kind of collected over centuries, actually. So,
Yeah, exactly. And people make a hobby out of it. I've seen a few people when I've been working in London that, one man's trash is another man's treasure. They
hmm,
go out with magnets and they try and see what they can find.
yeah,
And most of it's bikes and shopping trolleys, and unfortunately plastic pollution.
yeah,
It's almost quite a poignant way of saying that our water systems are a way that we're just covering up rubbish,
right,
and that it's there, but because the ocean is so vast and rivers are so fast moving, we often don't see it.
yeah,
So actually when we get to see or hear the quantities that could be going into a river or potentially into the oceans,
right.
it can be very surprising.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's a really important point about microplastics and people's perception of it. As I've also heard you say before, it's the kind of investigation into the not so obvious, which I think it can be quite overwhelming for people. I recently read an article that was in The Guardian, which was talking about how microplastics are in everything from, your food chain to your washing machine when you wash your clothes, but also in remote parts of the Arctic. So I think it can be quite hard to grasp people when you actually can't see it, or you don't often see it. How could you kind of explain this in an actionable way that people can really do something about tackling this issue?
Yeah, and I get it. It's overwhelming, and you feel like, what actions can I do that's actually going to make a difference? But what I've learned from the research that I've done is, in all honesty, small changes can make a huge difference.
Hmm.
You as, you're an individual person can have a huge impact on the environment.
Hmm.
Let's say you are part of industry or government, then the choices that you make within those organizations can have even bigger. So use what handrails you have to try and make that change. But if we look at an individual, so we did the initial work on microbeads and facial scrubs,
Hmm.
and then there used to be tiny plastic particles that used to be put into facial scrubs to act as exfoliants to get the dead skin cells off.
Hmm.
but no one had done any previous work looking at how many could be in one bottle.
Yeah.
So my first chapter of my PhD, I looked slightly crazy because I'd go to the supermarkets, and to get enough replicates, I bought loads of different brands of facial scrubs, um, and brought them back to the lab.
Yeah.
Diluted them down, filtered them, so any of the liquid would pass through the filter paper, leaving
Yeah.
any solids on top, which would be the plastic.
Hmm.
And then once I had the plastic, I could weigh them and I could have a look at their size. And we were able to estimate that for a typical facial scrub bottle, there could be 3 million microplastic pieces in there.
Wow. That's that's really crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then on a scrub on your hands, you could be washing your face with 10,000 tiny plastic pieces. And
Incredible.
speaking from my point of view, because I used to use these products, one, I never considered that there'd be plastic in there.
Hmm.
Just thought it'd be something natural that would biodegrade when you wash it down. I don't think I
Right.
even thought about it. I thought I was just using a facial scrub.
Yeah.
So to know that I was washing my face with plastic, which would then go down the drain, potentially through the sewage treatment works and into the ocean, by me not buying those products anymore, I'm
Hmm.
stopping potentially 10,000 plastic pieces from reaching the ocean
Right.
each time. So in that one decision that I go to the supermarket and I decide what facial scrub to buy, I could look in the ingredients list and choose one that hasn't got any plastic, so hasn't got polyethylene or polypropylene
Hmm.
or an alternative that they use. In that one moment, I'm stopping millions potentially going into the environment.
Yeah.
And then all of that public outcry and the decisions that the public were making and voicing their opinion that they didn't want to have facial scrubs that contain plastic,
Yeah.
that news started to trickle to industry, and then they started to voluntarily remove plastic from their products because it was unpopular
Mm.
and be on the right side. And then eventually, internationally, they started to make a law banning microbeads and facial scrubs. And that
Wow.
all just happened from our tiny lab at the University of Plymouth, where we were
Wow.
just curious about what was happening and how much was in a facial scrub. But
Wa-
it taught me the power of people and the voice
Yeah.
that people.
Yeah. So that was really, yeah, something that you researched, went to the public to legislation, and from there to industry.
Yeah, I mean, give power to the public,
Yeah.
and like you and me, we have
Hmm.
such a powerful voice of what matters to us. And if we just keep using our voice more and voicing it to industry, and if we can
Yeah.
have avenues where our voices can be heard
Yeah.
and industry takes them seriously, that's going to be a great way to pave the future.
Hmm. And what would you say to, because obviously, well, just looking around, a lot of products are made out of plastic still currently. What would you say to the companies that are currently producing a product which is made of plastic? How can they make a sustainable change? Is that changing the type of material they use completely, or to an alternative, or is it about recycling, or what would you say to them? What would be a concrete, actionable step for companies to take?
I guess it depends on what the product is. And I wrongly started my research thinking that plastic was evil. The only way to fix the oceans and to fix the plastic problem was to completely get rid of it.
Hmm.
And I was completely wrong. Plastic is a fantastic material
Okay.
that's a victim of its own success. I mean, even as I'm talking to you right now, my laptop is held on a tubbit box to
Yeah.
make sure
Right.
that
Yeah.
level, in my kitchen, I've got so much that food that's wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
The clothes that I'm wearing, the socks I'm wearing are plastic. We're
Yeah.
chatting through a plastic laptop.
Yeah.
It's an incredible material that's only been made in the last 100 years. That's really revolutionized our lives and our lifestyle.
Hmm.
Problem is how much we make of it. And that is so durable that when we throw it away, it's just going to persist in the environment
Hmm.
for potentially thousands of years. No one truly knows how long it takes for plastic to break down because it's such a new material. And
Yeah.
we can all see the effects of it. Even walking to this podcast from giving my dog a walk
Yeah.
along my road, there was loads of plastic packaging on the floor because the seagulls have got into the bin.
Yeah.
Most of it, all of the litter was plastic.
Yeah.
So I think that industry can do is have discussions right at the beginning of when they're making a product
Hmm.
about the potential environmental impacts of that product.
Right.
how they can try and mitigate it, and what's the end goal of that product. How are we going to dispose of it? Can it be reused again? Can you use another material that's going to be more environmentally friendly? Can we make sure that it's fully recyclable? Are the consumers going to know from the packaging how to recycle it, or if they can use it again, is that obvious? So it's making sure that everything's black and white, thought of with the environment in mind.
Yeah, right. So really looking at the entire life cycle of the product and the purpose of the use of that product and kind of yeah, making sure that that aligns. That reminds me of something we spoke about with Kimberly Miner. She had done this research to Mount Everest on
Right. It's fine.
right.
Yeah,
And I think that what she kind of pointed out was like, you know, they have to use this climbing gear in order to protect themselves in such harsh environments, but it's not something that is necessarily um, wise to use in a different context. So yeah, it's kind of thinking about the use of the product as well.
and I'm guilty of it because I love buying clothes. I love clothes, and it's hard to change your mindset that I don't need new clothes all the time. I
Right.
can just use my old clothes and fix them if they get broken. If I'm going to a wedding, no one cares. I can just use an old dress.
Yeah.
So I'm also trying to change my mindset and say, no, Imogen, you don't need any more clothes. Fix what you have, use what you have. You've got a full wardrobe.
Hmm.
It's so easy to overconsume,
Yeah, and I
whether that's
think that also
or
kind of goes back to the companies thinking about the durability and that whole lifespan of the products that they use. So building things in a way that it will last people for a long time, and it's not just something that will be in the trash soon after because of the quality or the type of materials used.
exactly. And it's treating plastic like the durable material that it is.
Hmm.
I think once we change our mindsets, and that's both individually and in industry,
Yeah,
it's going to make some really big changes.
nice. And biodiversity, of course, is very linked to this, and I think it's becoming more of a topic in terms of sustainability, also for companies. Yeah, what would you say is important for companies to take into consideration in this regard?
I think biodiversity is the flavor of life. It's really what makes us so unique on this planet that wherever you go, there's just so much diversity that you can see, whether that's in the ocean, whether that's in the air with birds. I
Yeah.
think I think a fact that I heard recently was that in a spoonful of soil, there could be 40,000 microorganisms.
Hmm.
It's like we're just completely surrounded by life.
Yeah.
What companies need to consider, and it's completely similar to plastic, is how what they're doing could potentially impact biodiversity. Because once we lose it, we're not getting it back.
Right.
So we need to protect what we have.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting point because it's not something that, if a species goes extinct, that could have kind of a domino effect on other things in the nature as well.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, I think I was having a conversation with a friend once where we were talking about mosquitoes and the fact that mosquitoes spread a lot of disease. And
Mm.
wouldn't it be amazing if we could just get rid of mosquitoes?
Right.
And I'm actually completely corrected because mosquitoes do have a function in, some ecosystems. Maybe they're eaten in a food chain.
Hmm.
So everything is required.
Yeah.
Uh, Everything has a purpose. We might just not know it. But I think the thing that really sticks in my head is once we lose something, whether that's a tiny bug all the way to like a charismatic elephant, we're not getting it back. And we don't want to see this stuff in a museum thinking, hey, this is what we used to have.
Yeah.
We need to open our eyes and protect what we do have now.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And there are repercussions for those things. And are there kind of specific industries that you would say you've discovered in your research that are the most polluting for microplastics in particular?
Yeah, it's hard to say because there's so many different elements.
Right.
I think maybe the ones that I've researched before, just probably because I know the most about them. But for me, my own personal opinion, it's all of this unnecessary packaging.
Mm.
And I understand that packaging is required to make food last longer, and the durability in transport, and that
Yeah.
plastic is actually lighter than, let's say, glass. So we're reducing fossil fuel usage in transport. But when you see packaging or, oh, but my bananas over there are wrapped in plastic, they don't need to be wrapped in plastic. They've got their own natural coating anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, I think let's try and minimize the amount of plastic that we use so it's only necessary.
Hmm.
Once it's necessary, there's a purpose.
Yeah.
But the unnecessary plastic is just going to create a lot of waste that we can't handle. And eventually it does go into our environment.
Yeah, again, I guess that goes back to the kind of the companies thinking about all the necessary steps that are needed in their production of their product and kind of reevaluating what are the necessary elements and what are the best ways to sell their product to consumers and what is the consequence of that and the life cycle of it.
Yeah, and I'd love the industry to, like we said at the beginning, to listen to what consumers want or what their concerns are.
Yeah.
So the washing clothes, we did a lot of research looking at when we wash our clothes and they're swishing and swirling around in the washing machine, how many tiny plastic fibers can come off.
Yeah.
Long story short, we found that 700,000 fibers can come off your clothes in a
Oof.
typical clothes wash, which is a huge amount, seeing as we wash our clothes on a daily, weekly basis, and then multiply that for a town, a city, the
Yeah.
whole world. What we find in the environment a lot is fibers and plastic fibers.
Yeah.
So there's two things. One is fast fashion and getting away from buying clothes that cost hardly anything
Yeah.
and change your mindsets that buy clothes that are durable. If you can do, buy clothes that you can fix. Uh, buy clothes that are pre-loved. I loved going charity dress shopping, so you can find some absolute gems.
Yeah.
Also, to the clothing industry, let's start looking at how we can try and make clothes differently so that they shed less fibers. So, looking at innovation, all the way to washing machines and looking at different inventions that can try and capture fibers within the washing cycle. So, whether you're an industry, so selling the clothes, making the clothes, washing the clothes, there's things that you can do within your own bubble
Hmm.
that can have a positive impact.
Yeah, right. So really, yeah, finding different innovations within all the steps of a clothing piece, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, I'm a big fan of secondhand fashion, and also I think that there's a lot of really cool, innovative companies that have come up with, yeah, recycled or upcycled clothing pieces as well, which I find really interesting. I'm curious to see how that kind of evolves as well.
Yeah. Something I was gonna do recently, for weddings, there's, a few companies now that rather than buying a dress that realistically we're gonna wear a handful of times if most, and then potentially try and sell it on. But this company was built on people like eBay can show the dresses that they have, and then you can rent them.
Hmm.
So the owner of the dress will be getting some revenue, getting some income.
Right,
Person gets to rent a really nice dress for not much money,
right.
and it means that you don't have a wardrobe full of dresses that you're just gonna wear a handful of times and creating waste, which you don't need.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
that's really interesting.
yeah, so I think this whole renting culture and using what other people have is hopefully really gonna take off.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, what would be kind of, if you would say, like the key revelation or the key finding that you have found through your research,
Uh,
or maybe the
so
most surprising finding?
yeah, I guess the most surprising finding, actually working with Kim, where we were part of the scientist team supporting the expedition team from National Geographic to Mount Everest.
Yeah,
So honestly, not knowing what we were going to find, we got snow samples all the way from base camp to near the summit in a place called Mount Everest Balcony.
yeah,
I found plastic microfibers in every single snow sample.
Oof.
So that really surprised me and that opened my eyes. And it showed me that wherever humans go, we're almost leaving a trail of breadcrumbs of plastic.
Wow.
Uh, and Mount Everest is somewhere originally I thought would be very pristine and clean, but the way that we've commercialized it in many ways, and it hasn't got a landfill site, at the top of Mount Everest, so
Yeah.
people unfortunately have waste and oxygen bottles, cigarettes
Oof.
to make their load lighter. So we're polluting the tallest mountain on Earth. We know that
Yeah.
we're finding plastic all the way in the deep sea. So it's really, is there anywhere that we've gone or that's still clean of plastic? Because it seems like everywhere we go, we're just finding it now.
Yeah.
So that's like in the heart, a bad feeling.
Yeah.
But the best feeling is knowing how much people care about the environment and even just going outside, taking a walk, even if it's in the city, just seeing that blue sky, even if it's cloudy, just getting that fresh air. People want to protect the planet because they love it.
Yeah.
And from every research piece that I've had, having people email me or chat to me from, oh, I'm not going to buy those facial scrubs again. I've gone to a natural alternative. Or rather than get all these carrier bags when I go shopping,
Yeah.
even if they're biodegradable, I'm just going to use the ones that I have or a tote bag. It's really shown me the power that people can have. And
Yeah.
it does make me optimistic for the future. We just need to make some really big changes, and industry and government need to help us implement those.
Right. And on that note, is there any other companies or organizations or people who inspire you by the things that they are doing to make the society or their industries more sustainable?
Yeah, there's loads I can think of. Off the top of my head, clothing companies, looking at clothing companies like Finisterre,
Hmm.
which are focused on durability, making clothes that will last, that hopefully you'll have for a lifetime, and providing a service that if they get broken, then they can fix it. I
Right.
think Patagonia also does the same.
Yeah.
So companies that are willing to make a big step forward to ensure that the impact that they're having, the customer is happy, but then the customer also knows that they're trying really hard with their environmental impact to make it better. And then in terms of organizations, Surface Against Sewage, Marine Conservation Society, their organizations are charities that are bringing the environment to the people and teaching us that we can, again, have a big impact in what we're doing. Get
Hmm.
outside, some litter pickers, start litter picking, because if you see someone litter picking or even picking up some rubbish on the street,
Yeah.
it's like a ripple effect that you're
Right.
inspired to do it yourself. So you're more likely to do it. The person behind you that's seen you do it is more likely to do it. So if we can create a whole world of people just picking up rubbish and putting it in the relevant place rather than the environment, then we can try and clean ourselves out of this mess.
You've inspired me to go outside to do the same after this. And we're already at the end. So I'd like to thank you for your time and for sharing all these really valuable insights. And I think I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that others will as well. So thank
Thanks
you.
very much for having me on. Cheers.
Thank you very much.